As I'm sure you are all aware, football is back. Sort of, in the form of a fan-free Bundesliga with players separated on the substitutes bench, but inevitably not at set pieces. Whether you tuned into the expert analysis of well-known Bundesliga aficionados Steve McManaman and Martin Keown on BT Sports or not, I thought it made sense to do a rare Bundesliga video. The top flight of German football, the Bundesliga, was founded in 1963, with the first season of Bundesliga football being the 1963-64 campaign. It's pretty incredible to think that, despite already having won a World Cup, Germany didn't have a national top flight up until that point. By comparison, the English Football League system, which the German system would be based upon, had been in place since 1888. I have previously done a video on the Football League's founding members, and I could swear someone suggested this Bundesliga video too, but for the life of me, I couldn't find out who. So if you've ever suggested this, thank you, and sorry you're not getting a proper shout out. Here are the 16 founding members of the Bundesliga. Where are they now? Cologne. Bundesliga. Just so you know, the teams listed in this video will feature in order of where they finished in the inaugural Bundesliga season, and that means that we start with Cologne. Cologne had a fantastic team during the 1960s, and they won their first German championship under the pre-Bundesliga format in 1962. Cologne also had more players at the 1962 World Cup than any other German club, so it was no great surprise when they won the very first Bundesliga title, doing so by a decent margin too. Cologne continued to be a really competitive side into the 1970s and 80s, finishing as runners-up 5 times and winning a second Bundesliga title in 1978. The club were relegated for the first time in 1998, and they have since become a bit of a yo-yo club. Having won the 2 Bundesliga title last season, Cologne are back in the Bundesliga now, currently set for a comfortable mid-table finish this season. MEIDERICHER, 3 Liga. Staying in the North Rhine-Westphalia, MEIDERICHER FC were the runners-up in the very first Bundesliga season, and that was something of a surprise. MEIDERICHER were renamed MSV Duisburg midway through the 1966-67 season only a few years later, and they remained in the Bundesliga until their first relegation in 1982. Duisburg have since become what the Germans would call a Fast-Ullmannschaft, or elevator team, having tasted 10 relegations and 8 promotions since the start of the 1980s. As the mathematicians among you will be well aware, 10 minus 8 equals 2, which means Duisburg now compete in the 3 Liga, having been relegated from the 2 Bundesliga last season. Duisburg are currently top of the 3 Liga, although they were in pretty shoddy form before the league season was suspended. Eintracht Frankfurt. Bundesliga. The only team from the Parliamentary Republic of Hesse during the very first season of Bundesliga football, and still the only team from the state in the Bundesliga now, Eintracht Frankfurt, had been named German champions once during the pre-Bundesliga era. That title came in 1959, and Eintracht were fancied as title contenders going into the Bundesliga's opening campaign. They finished the season in 3rd, an achievement they have equalled but never bettered in the 57 years since. Eintracht have enjoyed success in the DFB Pokal, with 5 titles to their name, and they occupy 13th place in the Bundesliga right now, having had their squad dismantled last summer. Borussia Dortmund. Bundesliga. Borussia Dortmund were the reigning champions of German football going into the very first Bundesliga campaign, but they couldn't retain their crown. They did manage to qualify for the Intercity Fairs Cup thanks to a 4th place finish, but it's worth noting that only 5 points separated 4th place and 11th place in the 1963-64 Bundesliga campaign. Having been crowned German champions in 1963, Bundesliga wouldn't regain that mantle once more up until 1995, even spending 4 seasons in the 2nd tier during the 1970s. Bundesliga had a real renaissance during the 1990s, even winning the Champions League and another resurgence under Jurgen Klopp at the start of the 2010s. The club is now almost universally considered the 2nd biggest in the German game, and rather aptly, they currently occupy 2nd place in the Bundesliga table. Stuttgart. 2 Bundesliga. Crowned as German champions twice during the 1950s, prior to the creation of the Bundesliga, VfB Stuttgart have won 3 Bundesliga titles in the near 60 years since. The club's 5th place finish in the inaugural Bundesliga season wasn't bettered until 1978, which was Stuttgart's first season back in the Bundesliga, following 2 seasons outside of the top flight. Stuttgart have since won Bundesliga titles in 1984, 1992 and 2007, but having been almost ever present in the division, they have fallen upon hard times over the last couple of years. Stuttgart were relegated from the Bundesliga for the 2nd time in 4 years last season, and right now they're in 3rd place in the 2 Bundesliga. Hamburg. 2 Bundesliga. Historically a big club within the German game, now desperately seeking a return to the top flight, Hamburg have a lot in common with Stuttgart right now. Up until 2018, Hamburg held the rare distinction of being the only team to have played in every single Bundesliga season since 1963. The club's first relegation was a bitter blow, but it had been a long time coming. The 6-time German champions and 1-time European Cup winners have been in decline since the start of the decade, and last season they failed to win promotion at the first attempt. Hamburg are currently in second place, tied on points with third place Stuttgart, in the race for promotion from the 2 Bundesliga. 1860 Munich, the 3 Liga. 1860 Munich have long laboured with the shadow of their giant Bavarian neighbours Bayern Munich hanging over them, but they have at least spent most of their past in the Bundesliga. 1860 Munich finished 7th in the inaugural Bundesliga season, as well as winning the DFB Pokal. A couple of years later, the club won their only Bundesliga title and began threatening Bayern's local dominance. 55 years on, the club now languishes down in the 3 Liga, having been exiled from the Bundesliga in 2004, and even having fallen into the 4th tier due to financial struggles in 2017. 1860's plight is a sad one, and one many of you have requested that I do a rise and fall documentary style video about, which I may well do at some stage. Schalke, the Bundesliga. Back to a current Bundesliga side, unlike the likes of Stuttgart, Hamburg and 1860 Munich, Schalke have never actually won a Bundesliga title. Only Nürnberg won more German championships in the pre-Bundesliga era than Schalke, who lifted the trophy 7 times between the 1930s and the 1950s, but never have they won the Bundesliga. Schalke have finished second 7 times, making them one of the unluckiest Bundesliga sides, and the club tasted relegation thrice during the 1980s. Top flight mainstay since 1991, Schalke found themselves 8th in the current Bundesliga table. Nuremberg, 2 Bundesliga. Speaking of the most successful team of the pre-Bundesliga era, we rapidly arrive at Nuremberg, who finished 9th in that very first Bundesliga season. The team from Bavaria were crowned German champions 8 times prior to the Bundesliga's creation, but only once since in 1968. They now fall firmly under the shadow of Bayern Munich, much like 1860 Munich. Nuremberg have tasted relegation a remarkable 10 times since the Bundesliga's inception, and they find themselves down near the bottom of the 2 Bundesliga table at the time of this recording. Despite not having won a league title in more than 50 years, Nuremberg still have the second most national championships of any team in German football, trailing only their Bavarian rivals, Bayern Munich. Werder Bremen, Bundesliga. Contrary to the clubs who have preceded them here, Werder Bremen have enjoyed most of their success during the Bundesliga era. Not once did the club win a German championship prior to 1963, and they have won 4 since then, a tally bettered by only Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmund and Borussia Mönchengladbach. In the 57 seasons since the Bundesliga was born, Werder have only spent 1 season outside of the top flight in the 1980-81 campaign. The club find themselves in serious danger of a second relegation from the Bundesliga this season though, currently languishing down in 17th place. Eintracht Braunschweig, 3 Liga. There were 2 Eintrachts in the very first Bundesliga season, and unlike Eintracht Frankfurt, Eintracht Braunschweig are one of 12 teams to have won the Bundesliga. That title came in 1967, but Braunschweig would taste relegation in the early 1970s. Following a 3rd relegation from the Bundesliga in 1985, Braunschweig began an era of struggle, and they didn't return to the top flight until 2013. Even then, they were relegated in their first season back in the Bundesliga, and following relegation in 2018, the club now find themselves in the middle of the 3 Liga table. Kaiserslautern, 3 Liga. Staying in the 3 Liga, Kaiserslautern's steep decline in recent years has been well documented, and I made a video about the remarkably successful minnows who have fallen on hard times not so long ago. Kaiserslautern, despite being a city of only 100,000 people, has played a significant role in the history of German football. The city's most famous son, Fritz Walter, is among Germany's greatest ever players, and it was a Kaiserslautern spine that inspired West Germany to their first World Cup title in 1954. The club weren't relegated for the first time until 1997, bouncing back at the first attempt before dropping into the 2 Bundesliga again in 2006. Kaiserslautern dropped into the 3 Liga for the first time in 2018, and they're now in danger of a once unthinkable relegation into the depth of German football's 4th tier. Karlsruhe, 2 Bundesliga. Having been slightly surprising inclusions among the 16 Bundesliga founders, Karlsruhe survived relegation by just a point in the first Bundesliga season. They spent 5 seasons in a bitter battle against relegation before it finally became too much, and they've alternated between the first, second and third tiers of German football ever since. KARLSRUHER last played top-flight football in the 2008-09 season, and they are now in the 2 Bundesliga, having finished second in the 3 Liga last season. Hertha Berlin, Bundesliga. Germany was of course still a divided nation back in 1963, and it would be for the next 27 years. That meant Berlin were by far the most easterly team in the Bundesliga, but they didn't exactly represent the former capital with distinction. Having finished 1 point clear of the drop in 1963-64, Hertha were relegated the following season after the league revoked their licence to compete in the division due to a string of financial irregularities. Desperate to have a team from Berlin in the top flight, this led to the now defunct Tasmania Berlin being handed an automatic promotion, only to have the worst season in Bundesliga history, winning only 8 points. Hertha bounced back before the decade was done, but subsequently spent much of the 1980s and 90s in the 2 Bundesliga. Hertha have been back in the top flight since 2013, currently occupying 11th place in the Bundesliga, 1 point and 1 place ahead of fellow Berliners Union Berlin. SC Preußen Münster, 3 Liga. And so we come to the first of the 2 teams to be relegated from the very first Bundesliga season, SC Preußen Münster, who always faced an uphill task in the top flight and ultimately just couldn't keep their heads above the water. The team came oh so close to sealing a Bundesliga return a few times during the 1970s, but just missed out. Following decades down in Germany's regional leagues, Münster won promotion to the 3 Liga in 2011, where they have remained ever since. Having flirted with the playoffs at times, Preußen Münster are currently threatened with relegation, sitting 6 points from safety with only a quarter of the season still to play. Saarbrücken, Regionalliga Südwest. Saarbrücken were the only representative of the state of Saarland in the inaugural Bundesliga season, and that isn't particularly surprising given the region's size and population. Once its own independent political entity, Saarland voted to become part of Germany in 1935 and once again after World War II in 1955. From 1950 to 1956, Saarland had their own national football team made up almost exclusively of Saarbrücken players. Saarbrücken competed in the French league system and even won a Liga title after the war before returning to Germany's footballing pyramid in 1952. Saarbrücken's selection as one of 16 Bundesliga members was the most controversial of any teams, and the critics would be proved right as the club became marooned at the foot of the Bundesliga table. Returns to the top flight came in the late 1970s, mid-1980s and early to mid-1990s, but all were brief. The club now competes in the Regionalliga Südwest, Germany's regional 4th tier, having been relegated from the 3 Liga in 2014, although they currently top the division and seem like the type of club that will make for a brilliant football manager save for any of you who play the game. That is it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, give us a like if so, and obviously do make sure that you are subscribed to HITC Sevens.